Good evening, everybody. My name's Andy Horowitz. I teach American History and Environmental Studies here at Tulane, and it's my pleasure to welcome you tonight to this conversation about rising seas, sinking land, climate change, Louisiana justice, and community. Just a few words before I turn things over to our very capable Master of Ceremonies. First of all, as I hope you know, this is the fourth event in a series produced by the Tulane Environmental Studies Program under the headline, The Katrina Disaster Now. And our culminating event for that series takes place precisely 1 week from today, next Tuesday, November 17th at 5:30 in this very room. And that event is just called The Katrina Disaster Now. We are gathering sorry, I just got a text message from May saying she was here, but this event, the Katrina Disaster Now, we're gathering a profoundly interesting group of people who include a distinguished clarinetist, a levees activist, a former resident of the St. Bernard Public Housing Project, a member of Tulane's Katrina class, a cultural arts leader, a construction worker, a charity hospital doctor, a librarian, a photographer, a teacher, and a poet. And we're asking each of them to tell us in 5 minutes what that phrase, the Katrina Disaster Now, means to each of them. I think it's going to be an extraordinary event, and I invite you all to come. Again, it's next Tuesday at 5:30 in this room. It's free and open to the public, and if you needed further inducement, we're feeding everybody supper afterwards across the street. But back to the matter at hand. This is a very special evening, and it took a lot of work to make it possible, so let me thank some people. Kathy Jack over here chairs the Environmental Studies Program tirelessly. That may be a euphemism because of how much work she does. Shelley Moe is sitting in the back. Some of you have some idea how many details go into coordinating an event like this. Shelley Moe coordinates all of those, every single one of those details. Katie Keene has helped us in that regard, and Rebecca Snedeker came through for us too, so thank you. We in the Environmental Studies Program here are lucky to be producing this event with two co-sponsors. The first is WWNO, and I suspect many of you learned about this event on the radio, so I'm grateful to them for helping us to invite you here and make you feel welcome. I'm grateful to the Coastal Desk at WNO and to Ron Biava, who made it possible for us to have a famous MC tonight, but more on her in just a moment. But first, I want to acknowledge the other co-sponsor, the Tulane Environmental Law Clinic, and specifically their community outreach director, Nguyen. May's the person who brought these four extraordinary guests together, and she is largely responsible for making all of this happen. We have a very nice reception planned for you afterwards, just out in the patio, and that would be a very good time to seek May out and thank her for her vision for this and to talk with her about the other good work of the clinic. I want to be clear that there were two important points in that sentence. One is that we all owe May a debt, and the other is that there's food afterwards outside, so we can continue the conversation. But that's enough from me. Debbie Elliott is going to take it from here. I imagine that for most of you, she does not need an introduction. As a national correspondent for NPR, Debbie Elliott's one of the most prominent voices, reflecting the news of our region back to us and sharing it with the rest of the country. She's covered a wide range of important stories, but for right now, I will simply point out that she truly distinguished herself, in particular with her extraordinary reporting on the BP oil spill, and she launched the series The Disappearing Coast, featuring the voices of our neighbors here in Louisiana, a series which reminded us vividly of a crucially important point, and it's the fundamental point that I'd like to make tonight, which is this: what we call environmental problems are always human problems too. So to introduce our very special guest and to carry us through the balance of the evening, I will happily turn the floor over to Debbie Elliott.
Hi, thank you. Welcome. I'm glad everyone could come, and I hope we'll have a good conversation here. I think that the challenges that face our country as we look at sea levels rising, land sinking, are not something that's in the future for the people of Louisiana. It's something that's happening here now. So I think there are lessons for the rest of the country from what is happening here and what communities here are dealing with. And we're going to learn a little bit about that from what I would say are the front lines from our panelists here. And what I'm going to do is just introduce you to each one of them, and then I'm going to have them tell you a little bit more about where they come from and what it looks like and how they've seen their land, their communities change because of what Louisiana is going through. And we'll start on the end with Theresa Dardar. Theresa is a member of the Pointe-à-Chien tribe in Lafourche Parish. And then we have Minh Nguyen. He is from New Orleans. He is a co-founder of Velo New Orleans. We have Rosina Philippe with the Atapacapa Ishak tribe. Did I do it okay? Atacapa Ishak tribe. That's in Grand Bayou Village on the west bank of Plaquemines Parish. And then over from the east bank of Plaquemines, we have Reverend Tyrone Edwards. He's the pastor at Zion Travelers Baptist Church in Phoenix. So Theresa, will you get us started? Will you just describe for us a little bit what it is like today for your community, what it looks like, where you live, and the change that you've seen?
Well, my community is a small fishing community, and now it's surrounded by water with a lot of tree skeletons, and we're located 20 miles southeast of Houma, and we're disappearing very quickly. And let's see, I lost my train of thought, sorry. But we have 68 homes left now in the community. It's a Native American community. And before, it was very beautiful. The tree skeletons that we now have, we used to have a lot of trees. I remember growing up, I didn't grow up in Pointe-à-Chien, I grew up in Houma, but my mom is from Pointe-à-Chien. And my grandfather lived all his life with no running water and no electricity or anything, and below from where I live. And where he lived, I remember growing up how beautiful it was. And now there's hardly any more land where his house was, and there are no more trees. And it's just a wide open waters. It's like in back of my house where there were trees, people now fish crabs with crab traps back there. It's all open. It's all open waters. It's more like a pond, and it's not at all like it was before. And some people say they don't believe in sea level rise. Well, it's happening. We see it happening every day, because we live right on the bayou, and we see the wharf. My husband's been watching his uncle's wharf, and it used to be so much higher, and now it's even with the water and sometimes underwater. And the wharf is still good, but it's just that the water is getting up higher, and we're losing land very fast.
I think that image of what was once trees, where you could see trees, and now you look and there are maybe stumps that stuck up out of open water, that is an image that really captures, I think, what is happening here. Minh, you want to talk a little bit about, now your family grew up your parents are in Venice, which is down at the front lines, but you're now in eastern New Orleans, am I right?
Yes. Hello. I was born and raised in New Orleans East, and my parents actually moved. They used to actually live in Franklin actually, and the thing is they moved to New Orleans East, but now they're in Beers, Louisiana, and just to give you like a little bit about my story, so my parents are actually refugees. They came over to the United States in 1980 after the Vietnam War, and they were fisher folks then as well in Vietnam. And coming to the United States, that's finding Louisiana and New Orleans. I mean, the reason why a lot of folks, the Vietnamese refugees came to New Orleans is because of 4 things. There was because of the climate, you know, kind of warm. I mean, today was actually warm. I mean, colder than yesterday. Yesterday was kind of warm. But because of the climate, the fishing industry, obviously, because of the religion, and then family. Those are the 4 aspects of why the Vietnamese refugees landed here in New Orleans. And just to let you know, that's sort of like where a lot of my history kind of based, right? And you know, I just went to this conference recently at it was a bar association, and I just found out that, like, yeah, we've been fishing for a long time. We came over here, and you know, my parents, they're like limited English proficient, and you know, coming to as a refugee, you don't have to really learn English. Like, the fish didn't speak English, so it's okay. You could still catch them without learning the language, right? And then from there, obviously, you could, you know, you catch it and then you sell it. You make a living that way. And then, you know, you didn't have to do any like assimilation at all. You just find a boat. I mean, fish, make money, buy a boat, go back and fish, make money. And that's basically how a lot of the Vietnamese community, that's basically what they did. Until today, we're still doing it, right? But even when they were coming into New Orleans and fish, I just found this out. If you're on my Facebook, you would read it. But there was a lot of backlash as well. I just learned that the Vietnamese fishermen actually filed a lawsuit against the Ku Klux Klan. Back in 1981. That is like crazy how like this, it just traced back to that time. So just imagine, right, like how folks are coming to United States because of war, and then trying to make a living, and then like there's people who don't want them there, but like they didn't choose to be here. So that happened, and then, you know, Katrina happened, so we got displaced again. The oil spill happened, got displaced again. Like, so like these are the things that I think we continue to have to like face during this time. And livelihood, again, like it's such a big deal just to see my parents go through this. And obviously, VELA, the organization that I run, we've been fighting environmental racism and environmental injustice for a long time. So I understand like how this actually really plays a huge factor, not only to my parents, but the community, right? We're continuing to be displaced, and I think this is a narrative that I mean, all of us could kind of talk about, right? So that's sort of like things that I want to share with y'all, and I think we could go into more later on.
Thank you. Rosina, your community is an island.
Well, sort of. We're water access only. The community of Grand Bayou, I'm descended from the Atakapa Ishak, and we've been in the Delta Plain for the last 5,000 years and on the Plaquemines Peninsula for the last 1,500. So we're not newcomers to this region. And still today, we maintain our traditional way of living. We are subsistent still, earning a living from the land and the water, and we have dealt with the changes that have come into the environment. In our community, we were forested at one point from the ridge all the way to the river. And with the encroachment of newcomers into our territories, where they have manipulated the landscape in order to further their lives, we now are faced with the situation that we see here in Louisiana, where our land is salted. It's going away at a tremendous rate. And also with the salting of the water, we're losing vegetation that we depend on for our livelihoods and medicines before. So there are all of these challenges that we are facing, but yet we're trying to defend and protect what's still there, yet trying to maintain the integrity of self, because, you know, we are who we are because of where we are, and we identify with the region because we have a symbiotic relationship with our environment. You know, we see ourselves in the lives in the context of how we fit into the circle of life, our life world, and we're a part of it. And so there are so many changes coming, and we see the domino effect of what's happening in the landscape. And we also see that, the layers where there's overlap from one disastrous event to the next. And when I say disaster, there's human-induced disasters and natural disasters. And a lot of people, they get confused. Sometimes you can have a natural disaster like an incoming storm, and then you have the human-induced disaster because of the political landscape that comes up afterwards. So there are a lot of different things that we're juggling in order to maintain a presence and have a voice about what's happening in coastal Louisiana, because we feel that we're on the front line today in my community and these other communities, but what we're facing today, others will face tomorrow. So it's time to wake up, and join in together to make a difference. And we'll have more to say later, so thank you.
And Reverend Edwards, tell us a little bit about your community and its history and what's happening to it today.
Yeah, we're on the opposite side of the river in Plaquemine Parish. I don't know if any looked at the boot of Louisiana, but Plaquemine Parish is that part that extends from the bottom of the boot that goes into the Gulf of Mexico. We often like to refer to the big toe that slipped out the boot of Louisiana. And we're surrounded by water. But the community where I live is a very old community. We can trace our family back 6 generations. I mean, when you look at Plaquemine Parish, a lot of Native people is there, and we moved the Native people out. A lot of Africans were brought to Plaquemine Parish in order to build up the land. So when you think about antebellum Louisiana, you have to think about the plantation, but a lot of my ancestors came from West Africa, and they were brought there for a particular reason because of the climate. So they were used to growing rice and all those things, so rice was a big thing during that antebellum period. And so our ancestors, they grew the rice, they grew all the crops and built a lot of the plantation that was in the area. So and my ancestors, they were free people that came there, but we had a lot of other people that came there that was brought there as slaves for free labor. So we really built Plaquemine Parish, built the plantation. We had over, where I lived, there was 30 plantations just in the community where I live at alone. And so during Reconstruction period, when you had a lot of blacks in Reconstruction, a lot of my ancestors were state representatives and senators. My great-grandfather was part of 1868 Constitution Convention. So we have a stake involved in that community. Our life, our blood is in the soil. So when we look at it now with hurricanes, it's a big threat to us because we're surrounded by water. And so when we think of climate change, we have to look at with the water warming, how much water surrounded. In 1965, I was around 13 years of age when Hurricane Betsy came. 40 years later, Hurricane Katrina came. But in a 7-year period of time from Hurricane Katrina, we've seen 7 hurricanes. And then Hurricane Isaac came 7 years later, while our community was destroyed because we're surrounded by water. So we're really threatened by water, sea level rising, so we have to be involved with climate change because we're not moving because we have so much invested. And so that's why we plead to other people to understand why it's Plaquemine Parish today, but when you look at California wildfire, hurricane, tornadoes all over this country, all of us should be involved in the climate change movement.
All of you have been affected by not only just changing climate, but hurricanes, the BP oil spill, man-made disasters, the way that Louisiana's coast has been carved up for navigation and for oil and gas development. Mm-hmm. And every time one of these things happens, there were political decisions made to address, okay, what are we going to do now kind of thing. At the same time, Louisiana has a master plan that's trying to figure out what the state's response is going to be to what is happening to the boot. Do you all feel like you have a voice in the process, in the decisions that are being made that affect your communities?
I'll take. No. This direct answer. We did participate in the meetings. We sent many of our people to attend the meetings at their own expense, to attend the meeting, to have a voice, and at the end of the day, all of our suggestions, all of the comments that were made did not make it into the final document. So as far as the master plan for Louisiana, there is no plan for Native people. You know, our coastal communities were left out of the plan. Matter of fact, recently I just heard down in Plaquemines, there's some discussions going on, of course not with our communities, but with the various entities that see that they have the power or seem to have the power. They're talking about cutting off the peninsula at a certain point and just letting it go, you know, back into the, you know, the ocean or the Gulf or whatever, and just try to shore up the rest of it, you know. So that's the kind of discussions that's going on, not with the people, because if they took into account our suggestions, if we had a voice in the proceedings, then things would be a lot further along and a lot different.
And when you talk about the master plan, I just talked about how community had a whole bunch of plantation. Well, Louisiana, we have a master here called gender. So when you talk about the master plan, you're really talking about the master plan. And that master plan is about how business people benefit from these projects as it relates to coastal restoration. And there's been so many plans. Before Hurricane, 40 years ago, Hurricane Betsy, it was studied. There's some study that could have been put in place by the Corps of Engineers, but we wouldn't have the problem we had with Hurricane Katrina. So when you think about the master plan, the study is about how people like governors can give money to parish presidents, other people, so when they run for presidents or whatever they're running for, these people are supposed to campaign. But it's not about building the courts, it's not about stopping wind surge, the thing that we really need.
So yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
So as as a community organizer, I would say yes. Obviously, we do have a voice. We do have power. We have power of numbers, right? We don't have the money, but we definitely have powers in numbers. And one of the things that we are doing right now is we are getting people out to vote. That's basically one of the things that I'm asking everybody here. For those who are voting in Louisiana, we can make a difference in that way. So I know that yes, we have a lot of we have a lot of challenges in front of us due to like the oil company and the leadership of Louisiana doesn't really the leadership in Louisiana really they like capitalists, right? Like they like, that's basically what we're facing right now. And I think if we have a change of leadership, things can change. So I think that's sort of where I would say, like, if we go out and vote in Louisiana, the people of Louisiana understand how climate change really affects our community. They need to go out and vote for those who are at the best of their interests and ensure that we keep them accountable to make sure that they are doing something about it.
Just to play, go ahead.
Yes, we have a voice, but there's a disproportion in the power construct. Mm-hmm. So if you're saying something and those who are empowered, can disregard what you're saying, it's almost like being a paper tiger. Mm-hmm. You're fierce and ferocious, but at the end of the day, you're just paper. Mm-hmm. So there needs to be a balance, an equity where what we're saying carries as much weight as what they're saying, so there is a true meeting and a collaborative effort, that we all can benefit from. So yes, we have a voice, I agree with you, but it's the power construct that we have to recognize. It's not, it's not equal.
Theresa, Dardar, have you found that there are ways to make your voice heard, to make a difference for the way that your community seeks to remain what it is?
Well, we're not in the master plan, so if nothing is done in our community, it will slowly wash away. And we've contacted, well, my husband has contacted parish presidents, and they've done nothing. So, it's true, you have power in numbers, but if you're talking to people that it's not really listening, like all these meetings that they have for the master plan. I believe that they just have these meetings because they have to have these meetings for the public. But what you say at these meetings, do they really listen?
That's why we have to elect our own people into office, because that's
How do you see, okay, there's this challenge that's happening where if the river is re-engaged, you know, to rebuild land, there are going to be communities that are put at risk in order to save other parts. Those are tough trade-offs to make. So how do you make the case that this should be saved and that should not? I mean, how do you look at the trade-offs in trying to figure out how to create a future for South Louisiana?
First of all, I don't believe in the trade-off concept, because we have been sacrificing all our lives. So when people start talking about let's trade off, no, we've been in that position all our lives. So we don't have nothing to trade, because what are you talking about is our livelihood. You know, we're gonna live on the land that we live on, that Mother Earth give us, and because our ancestor blood is in the land, we don't have nowhere else to go but that place. And people actually, once you move somewhere else, well, move to Tornado Alley somewhere, move to California where you're gonna get burnt up, you know. So we're saying that we're gonna put our stake in the ground where our ancestors live, and we're gonna live there, and we're gonna fight to stay with. So we're not even talking about compromising with anybody on that, because once you put yourself in that position, then you lose. So we're saying that's not even nothing for us to even think about from where we live at. And so when people come with that, we just say, no, we're not trading off, because that's what we've been doing all life. So why would you continue making sacrifice? So when you put that on the table, when once we stamp it, then we agree. We say, no, there's no trade-off here. We're gonna live here. My great-great-children gonna live here. We're gonna stay here as long as we can live on earth. We're not even thinking about moving.
You know, I find it amazing in some of these conversations, the loopholes we give ourselves as people in these conversations about for the greater good. You know, it's like for the big picture, you know, somebody has to be sacrificed. You know, all these outs we give ourselves when there is no real cooperation and collaboration, because you're already looking for the loophole. So we need to change the dialogue. You know, we need to change, you know, the conversations where it's not top down. You know, we're meeting at an equal place where, you know, true conversations can take place and people can stop all of these little cliches, because it's about life. It's about the quality of people's lives. You know, it's nothing to barter with. And they need to come to that realization that it's real. It's not something just, you know, black and white on a paper that you can just discount and put on a shelf somewhere. So until that happens, you know, I don't, I agree. You know, I don't buy into, you know, there must be sacrifices, or who's to decide that your life has more value than mine. The quality of your existence, you know, supersedes the quality of the existence that the Creator has given to me and mine. So, you know, with that in mind, I think some harder conversations need to happen.
I mean, I'm gonna echo that as well. So I mean, if y'all don't know, like New Orleans East is like this. So you know how like there's a horse, I mean, like there's a shoe, and then there's like that little part right here. New Orleans East is right there, right? So when the storm surge comes in, it goes right there, right? So we're really close to the water as well, and we do need our wetlands, because our wetlands serve as a buffer for our city, right? And we already seen that through Hurricane Katrina. So I think, again, like, and people ask us, why y'all still live there? And it's like, well, like I mean, my parents came from Vietnam to United States. This is their home now, right? We buried our aunts and uncles, our grandparents, our friends, our family, and you're asking us to get up and leave? Like, that's a lot to ask for, right? This is our home. That's the reason why we can't go anywhere. I mean, we already left something that, you know, that we used to call home. So I think that's something that, like, for me, I mean, it's like, even though my grandparents passed away, I have to make sure that, like, whatever they created when they came here to the United States will continue to stay here. So that's sort of like, that's a responsibility that I feel like I have. And if addressing climate change is one of it, I will talk about it. You know, we will have to bring it up. We're going to fight until they have to kill us. That's basically what it is. So.
Let's talk a little bit about the practical lessons that you all might have, because you are living in a place that's changing. You mentioned there's saltwater intrusion, land is disappearing. What are the things that your community has learned and done in order to continue to live in a place that is no longer how it used to be? Theresa?
Oh, me. Well, we still plant, and we don't have, cattle and pigs like we used to. We still have chickens in the community, and we adapt as it goes. You know, you only have what you can have on the land, but you're still living off the land, and we're still going to live off the land for as long as we can. So far, we've been lucky that we're still making our own vegetables and our eggs, and so we're still fishing. It's not as good fishing as it was before BP, but we're still making a living. And as long as we can make our living and we have a little piece of land, we're staying.
Reality for us is this: we're facing situations that were not of our own making, but yet we're having to bear the brunt of the outfall. You know, and the levees are getting wider and higher and building around communities that came into our territories, and that's okay. But you hear people describe my community as at risk, obsolete, totally outside the levee system. You're in this zone and that zone. You can't have this and you can't have that. Well, our community existed long before the levees. And all the resources that the government brings into the territory, none of it is put into trying to preserve our way of life. We live in concert with nature. We have always known that the landscape changes. We had to adjust our lives to accommodate that because we're a part of nature. Our lives are tied that intimately to our environment. And if it's not your way of life, then that's okay, because there's a place enough on this planet for all of us to live the life that we choose to live. But our lives should not continue to be imperiled because of outside activities, and then get the finger pointed at you, and we're told that, well, my tax dollars can no longer go into replacing what you lost because of this event or that event or whatever, when we were not the people who created the problems in the first place. So I think that's a reality that a lot of people don't want to face. And like I said, a lot of people that I've spoken with have given themselves the out, well, for the greater good, or you don't understand the big picture. Well, we do. And we're not, we have to start thinking about this planet, not just Louisiana, coastal Louisiana. Climate change is real. It's a global event, and as a global family, we need to face the challenges that we're putting off onto, this planet, and see what we can do to be better stewards, all the way around. So,
our community, prior to Hurricane Katrina, I had very little involvement in coastal restoration. That wasn't part of the vocabulary. But after Hurricane Katrina, we saw the need to build houses better. Plaquemine Parish was totally destroyed. We came back, not with the government help, and rebuilt our community. And we've always lived in segregated community. We was always left out because of racism, so we had to do for self. So we used to doing for self. That's not new for us because racism stopped us from being a part of the mainstream. So when Hurricane Katrina came, we just came together as we always done as a community, as a village, and came back and rebuilt our community. Of course, we put the highs up higher than we did. We used different type of materials to strap it down, but we saw the need that our community wouldn't be open if we didn't come back on our own. Of course, we had a lot of volunteers from all around the country came help us, but that wasn't the government, that was American people, and we separate the American people from the American government. And so, but we led the movement to rebuild our community, and we're gonna always do that, because the same DNA that was in us to build to spank in Africa, in Egypt, and other places, is the same DNA in us to, if our community gets destroyed tomorrow, we're gonna rebuild it again.
So, I mean, I just wanted to ask, I want to ask the audience, like, who likes seafood, right? Raise your hands.
Who likes seafood? I don't think your mic is working.
Check. Okay, so, I don't know why it's not working. Yes, okay, cool. So, who likes seafood? Oh, a lot of us, like oysters, y'all like oysters? Redfish, bass. These are the things that like we produce, right? In Louisiana. I mean, in the community. And the crazy thing is that like the folks who are fishing are the only ones that are really fighting. But the thing is, we all benefits from it. So I just imagine if we all, those who like these things and benefit from these things or enjoy it and love the oyster po' boy and the catfish po' boy and the crawfish. I mean, these are the things that we may not have anymore if we don't come together. And that's what I really wanted to just address, right? And because there's so few of us, right? I mean, we go down there, there's so few of us that I mean, sometimes I don't even come visit my parents, but that's just basic what it is. Like, there's so few of them fighting for their land, fighting for their livelihood, fighting for their family, but the rest of the country are not really acknowledging what is really happening and how it would, like long-term wise, like how it would really affect us. We won't have the oyster po' boys. We won't have the fish po' boys anymore. We don't have what makes New Orleans what New Orleans is. And that's the one thing that I think people are not really paying attention to until it's gone. And I don't think we should wait until it's gone.
One more thing, even beyond feeding ourselves, beyond food. Mm-hmm. I mean, look at the amount of resources that are extracted from our territories that go to fuel the nation. So, you know, from out here, our resources go out into the nation. So I think the nation has a responsibility to see to it that the places of these extractions and abuses are protected and preserved and healed as much as possible. You know, so the resources need to be returned to these places.
If I could just add one other thing to that. To me, the sad indictment is on the American government, because when there's a disaster in another part of the world, this country would go there in a hurry and put millions of dollars into those countries. We need to do the same thing for internal displaced people in America. You know, it's not because the money is not there, it just hasn't been made a priority. Because if they can take places like Plaquemine Parish and get the people to move, then they can use it for the oil companies to continue to do business there in other places. So it's not even about why we should move. We're just saying that if we stop looking at capitalism and start really looking at doing the thing that we tell everybody abroad. Because prior to Hurricane Katrina, the United States government was a part of the human rights movement talking about internal displaced people and what they should do, human rights violation. Well, Katrina came and we was treated like a third world people. They didn't apply the same thing that they do abroad to people here in America. So we're just saying we got to really look at the big picture, is that this country can afford to rebuild Plaquemine Parish, can afford to rebuild the United States. They can do it. We just have to make a priority, and it's important that young people, other people get involved with this movement to make sure that it happens.
You know, I'd like for you all to tell me what you think the solutions are. You know, you talk about rebuilding Plaquemines Parish. Do you see the government putting up more levees? I mean, what specific things would you all like to see happen that would protect your way of life?
It's very simple. There's been enough study to show that when a hurricane comes to area, you got wind surge. You got to put up barriers to protect the wind surge. It's not just about levee, it's about all the wetland. And I'm saying the United States have enough money. If we take the amount of money that we spend, give the Corps of Engineers on each project, and all these, the weekly groups and all these other groups that does this work, and we give them billions of dollars. And let me tell you something, disaster big, we're just saying the money is there to build our wetlands up, to put the kind of barrier that protect the whole Gulf Coast, not just Plaquemines Parish, but we're talking about Seminole, Jefferson Parish, along the whole Gulf Coast, where you put the proper amount of barriers that's there to prevent wind surge from coming so our community can stay. So the study's been there, it just, they haven't made it a priority.
Do any of you?
For me, I'm sorry.
You go ahead.
Okay, for me, I think there are some situations that have been created where certain entities operate with impunity, and they pass laws and rules and regulations to protect themselves. I'm talking about adverse impact legislation, where these entities can come into the region and, let's say like the levees, for example. In my community, there's a levee project going on right now. Now, we know for a fact that the heightening of that levee, the widening of that levee, will create an adverse impact situation on my community when the waters, when, I didn't say if, when the waters come with the next event, storm event. So, and, you know, but we have no leg to go into litigation against these entities because the federal law says that you can't, you know, get any type of suit against them. But in trying to protect ourselves and being proactive, because I believe in self-help, you know, we've been there for a very long time. And in trying to protect ourselves, because we know what's coming, we know it will happen, you know, we're trying to like do some bulkheading, bring in some sediment on our own, and yet we find that our people are told to desist because you're going to face fines. You know, there's crazy fines that they're trying to impose on us, you know, because they won't allow you to help yourself, even in a proactive way. So it's that kind of situation that we find ourselves in, that we need to make sure that we take another look at the legislations that are, the laws that are passed, and how it's hampering, you know, people from being able to help themselves. So, in October 2009, I still remember, we did a fly out to DC, and I was able to meet with Senator David Vitter and Mary Landrieu, and we were talking to them about the fact that like we need to think about like alternative energy, right? And like wind turbines, like across the street from our office at the NASA facility, they're building like these wind turbines. I see them. But the thing is, like, we're not using it here in Louisiana. We're shipping it out to a different country, like I mean, a different city, like California, state in like California. But I don't know why we're not doing that. Like other countries are like using different alternative energy. Different states are doing it. We have lots of water. We have lots of wind. Why are we not looking at that? Why? I asked those questions to them, and they say like, you know, well, the oil company, like that's our natural resource. This is what we use. They make money. They employ people. And I say, yeah, I understand that, right? Yes, they employ a lot of people. They're the biggest employer. I get it. But we could think about like retraining them. We could train them, spend some type of resources to train them to use different alternative, which could be another economic driver here in the state of Louisiana. I think there's a lot of resources that we're not really looking at. We're just looking at something that, you know, obviously is something that they're used to, and they're not believing in change. And I think that's something that that's one of the things that we could talk about. That's one of the solutions that we could look at, and we could just look at other states and different cities. And I think again we're missing the boat right now, and I think
there's so many things that we can do that could address the climate change. And I think like right now, Mother Nature is not really happy. You know, we're getting it really hot right now, and lots of crazy stuff is happening around the country. And I think that's something that we really have to talk about. And I think for you too, I mean, I think when you're talking about legislators and legislation and policy, I think those are one of the things that we do have to change. And again, it goes back to like keeping our elected officials accountable, right? It goes back to like the voting, you know, making sure that we're at the table, we're going to the polls, and make sure those who are representing us are voting in the best of our interests, and making sure that there's policies that don't hurt us and actually help us.
You know, Rosina said something early on that caught my ear, which was, who we are is where we are. And as you've seen the where disappear around you, what have your communities done to preserve your traditions, to preserve your way of life? And I'll start with you, Theresa.
What we've done to preserve.
Yeah, what do you do as you see I get this real sense from all of you that your sense of self and your sense of community comes from place, comes from where you are. And as that place is under such rapid change, what is happening in your communities to preserve that self, those traditions, the things that make who you are?
Well, we haven't done very much, actually, but because we really don't know what to do to save the land. But we're in the process of trying to get a greenhouse to preserve our plants. We've had, before, our ancestors didn't have doctors. If they were sick, they just went in back of their house, got their plants, made a tea, and it would heal them. Well, we've lost so many of these plants, with the saltwater intrusion. Mm-hmm. So we still have a few. So one thing we want to do is to build a greenhouse, elevated greenhouse, and put our plants in, and teach the children. We have culture camp once a year, and for a week, and this would be a way of teaching our children as well, a greenhouse. But we have to try to save some of our heritage and our traditions, on the land where we are, which is disappearing pretty fast. But like you asked about for the solution to, well, I agree with Reverend Tyrone about if we would have our barrier islands, that would help a lot. Because before, when we had barrier islands, we didn't get the water we get now, and we didn't have any levees. When we would get water from a hurricane, it would come in, but it would never even go up the bayou. It would come in, and it wouldn't get very high. Before it would get high, it would start to recede, because we still had the wetlands, mm-hmm. and we still had the barrier islands. And that all slows that water down. And without that, but with the politicians we have, and I'm sure they receive money after every storm, but they don't put it where they're supposed to. They could have rebuilt those barrier islands after every hurricane, mm-hmm. but they were not rebuilt. And they don't plan to rebuild them in the master plan.
And you look like you're thinking.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, to us, all our lives, we always believe in self-determination. Mm-hmm. And the thing that keep us going is our self-determination. And our the DNA that us keep us going. Our genogram tell us that we got to do stuff for ourselves. And so my mother used to always tell us as children, and my grandfather say, our condition never changed by who's in the White House. It's based on what we do for ourselves. It taught us that if you don't know the solution to your problem, the solution somebody give you might not be that solution. So we're going to continue doing the thing that we do to survive as a community. We are spirited people, so we don't let no situation bring us down. So we stay up. So, because we've been living with hurricanes, disasters, all our lives. We always had to deal with what people call obstacles. And so we used to bouncing back, we used to standing strong, and so we try to make sure that each generation come up understanding that you gotta be strong. We was taught only the strong survive, but we are strong as we are as a community, that all of us got to stay together as a community, and if we stay together as a community, nothing can stop us from bouncing back, nothing can stop us from rebuilding when every other disaster comes, because that's what's been happening all our lives.
Rosina?
In Grand Bayou, to meet the physical needs of our community, we have built better houses, mitigated flood loss through elevated homes,
How high are they?
12 to 15 feet.
That's high.
So that's pretty high. So that's one of the things that we have done to maintain community. To meet our economics means, we've changed our nets. We used to trawl before, now the nets are on frames, so we're harvesting differently. Also, to maintain the integrity of self, a sense of identity and community and the cultural identity, we have constant conversations, family conversations, all inclusive, young to old, where we reinforce and tell them about the integrity of life, the quality of life, that life as we live it has value. There is value in being responsible and seeing yourself as a steward of your environment, not taking, but see a part where you have to contribute, you have to protect. Also, we are, like Theresa, we are challenged as far as our plants. So we're exploring agroforestry, trying to create food forests, where we're bringing in different fruiting trees that would not normally be found in the same place, but are complementary, and trying to grow them in this one area. So in case, resources are limited coming into our community during any type of disastrous event, at least we would have the possibility to feed ourselves from, from our own growing trees. Also, education. We're doing a lot of networking. We're educating ourselves on what's out there, who's out there, who are our allies, who's, suggesting things that would go contrary to our continuing life and our life world. So we're looking to make connections, connecting in solidarity with other like-minded people, visionary people, people that see the future, with a clear eye, of what the possibilities are. There are a lot of negatives out there, but if you fuel your life with negative energy, that's what you're going to get. So we're looking to make connections with those positive thinking people, the people that are visionary, and that positive energy is the energy that we're bringing back into our community, to our people, in order to ensure that we maintain our place, and not just for ourselves today, because sometimes the changes come slowly, but we have to maintain the place as a legacy for the future generations that go beyond our own existence. And that's basically what we're doing.
So I'm just thinking about everything that's been going on, and how my parents are preserving what they have left. I know my parents, them and their group of friends, what they have been doing is they do have their own. It's crazy because I'm just picturing it. They have their own little farm. They have ducks running around. They got a goat one time. They have chicken everywhere. and not only that, like they're growing their own, like they're doing their own agriculture, but they're also trading, right? They're trading with other community members across, like, you know, in the area. So I think that's one of the ways that they are like kind of preserving what they have economically. And just to be honest, my parents are party people, so they host like a lot of parties at their houses. They have a big old like living room, kind of karaoke room with like lights and everything. But like that's how they kind of like really preserve their hope, right? Right. So they invite people to come over. They build community in that way. I mean, all you know, backgrounds. They come by and drink and sing and like really like I think like socializing is also really important in that life. I mean, like that's how you really build community, and I think that's where I got that's where I got it from from my parents. So I think
those bonds that are formed socially like that end up being the bonds that hold a community together in disaster, right?
Yep, exactly. And I think, you know, and I know my dad used me over here because like we get resources, we bring it down to Plaquemine Parish, and then basically he dispersed to like the people in the community, right? So I mean, we understand. Yes, my dad tells me like all the time, like New Orleans get everything, we don't get anything. So I think that's one of the things that we just really have to talk about in terms of a networking, right? We have to make sure that people who are receiving resources know that we have to, in terms of equity, right? We have to share what we have with those who need it more. And just to like kind of close it, but my wife is she's the Southern Plaquemine Parish pharmacist. So I know all of like the stuff that's happening down there. And for her, she picks up the phone all the time, right? So there's only one pharmacist down there. So she's in the hospital, yes. So, I mean, she tells me all the time, she picks up the phone call every time because there's a lot of people out there who need the mental support, right? She picks up, hi, Miss Mary. Yes, I'm working today. Yes, I'm doing fine. Yo, yes, you told me yesterday. So she tells me all that, all the time. Like, I think that's the community, right? That's the community that I believe that we'll make it through a lot of these struggles together and really have that community, and I think that's what's going to continue to preserve and be persistent in what they have. So
we're gonna go to questions here in just a moment, but I guess for a final thought before we see what folks want to talk about. Are there lessons that you all think you can share with, that what you've learned could help other communities who will soon be in the same place that you are? You know, think about New Orleans. I mean, New Orleans has taken some blows, but has not suffered what you have yet. And other communities all along the American coastline, if you think about it.
I think it's broader than that. I think we need to look at ourselves as a global family.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think to know when you face these impacts, you're not alone. It's very important. You know, and through networking capabilities, those that have those capabilities to reach out and have a conversation, to reach out and come together in solidarity. You know, what are you doing in your community? What's happening? What have you tried? What has failed? What has succeeded? And that information is out there. And being able to reach out and connect with somebody else, maybe someone that knows what you're talking about, that's important. And so basically to know that you're not alone. And maybe the things that you work on today, you know, you may seem like it's going nowhere, but you never know, that could be the catalyst for a greater movement. So just to encourage yourself and others, you know, and reach out and make those human connections, because that's what it's all about, really. It's about life. And when I say life, in our community, we see life in all its aspects and connections. So it's about life and the quality of life. And I think it's important that we reach out and touch and talk to each other.
You know, right after, just for the Katrina anniversary, we had some people from New Jersey and New York came down to our community, and I made several trips to New York. and right after when Hurricane Isaac hit the northern part of Plaquemine Parish, we immediately went up there, and first of all, people got to be very hopeful. First of all, people have to have hope. They got to understand that as a community, they have to define what they want the community to be, because what happened, people will come into your community and bring stuff in and redefine your community. We see that in New Orleans, how people came in. You don't know, used to have lower ninth ward, now you got upper ninth ward, because some people think they need to be upper ninth ward. But we're saying that you have to define your community, and what you have to do, you got to come closer together as a community. And so first of all, people need hope. Because when people see the despair, the first time they get hopeless, like what can happen? No, when you come together as a community with your neighbor and other people saying, no, we got to take care of our community. We got to come back to our community. Because when you leave your community vacant long enough, big business will come in and take it over. So the first thing is you always got to give people hope. They got to believe in themselves. They got to believe that as a community they can rebuild, and they have to define what they want the community to be, what it was like before, and saying we're going to build better, but the culture maker of the community shouldn't change. So we've been going around the country in New York and other places and working with people to first of all give them hope and saying that you have to define your community.
And you have to support each other. You really have to support each other. You help each other out after every disaster.
Well, I know there are questions. I think there's a microphone somewhere so everyone can hear your question.
Yes.
Anyone want to start off? Looks like we've got one here and one here. Want to pass the mic?
Hello.
And do me a favor and say who you are if you don't mind.
Take the privilege of co-sponsorship and call on our director of the Tulane Environmental Law Clinic, Professor Adam Babbage.
Hi. So I'm Adam Babbage. My question is, for those of us who feel relatively safe behind our levees, you've told us to vote, but what else should we be doing really to support the people who are in your positions?
Well, I would say, again, that we're all in the same situation because of climate change. I think there's a misnomer out there. When you look at what's happening with this country, the unusual weather pattern and season that's taking place. You know, places in Texas having snow that was unthinkable, snow in Texas. You start looking at the amount of hot weather we taking place. Look at all the amount of sinkholes that take place. If we don't begin to get this government to become more responsible, we're going to be a problem. Because what's happening with our government, with this government, is now you have Earl Company people who are now legislators and can actually vote on issues that are relating to Earl Company business. Even in the state of Louisiana, the Department of Natural Resources in this country, in Louisiana, if you bring something for them, it got to go to somebody that's part of the Earl Company to get clear. We're saying that because of climate change, everybody in this United States should be involved in getting our government to begin to looking at what's happening to to Mother Earth and get involved in saying we got to step up. Because I spoke at the very climate change thing Senator Representative Waxman had. He told me out of his own mouth, he said, this Congress, the majority of Congress, not going to touch climate change because of all of us get money from early interest people. So the only way this country is going to change is young people going to have to start getting involved in this climate change movement. When you start getting involved in this movement, Barack Obama's in the White House because of young people. When young people get involved in the movement, it's going to change. So it's time now that young people get involved and understanding what climate change is, because while we're talking about what's happening in Plaquemine Parish, look at what's happening in New York. Look at what's happening in California, all over the country. Some unusual things are happening. That's climate change. So this climate change movement, we all have to get involved in, and to do that, we got to get our legislators to begin to stop taking money from big interest and start looking at how we protect this whole United States, you know, to make it a better planet for all of us to live on.
I have a much simpler response, I guess, much more basic response of what you can do. I think there needs to be clarity of perspective. We need to stop seeing you and me and start seeing we. And I think when people start getting that straight in their minds and in their thoughts and in their outlook, things will change. That'll be the true beginning of change. Being inclusive, putting yourself in that situation. saying that we are involved in this. This is happening to us. Now, this is happening to the people on the coast as opposed to the people over here or whatever. So that's needs to happen. We need to see ourselves as being together on this.
And you're right. I mean, like, we have to look at it at a global sense. I mean, things are happening not just in the United States. It's happening all around, like, the world, right? And I'm just reading, like, the Antarctic ice melts has doubled since 2010. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that you could do. And I think, like, let me just think of, like, a perspective of, like, a young person. I know that you could even, I mean, you at home could do something, right? Like, you could recycle, right? You could unplug things, you know, when you're not using it. Turn off the lights. Don't leave the AC thing on. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you could do, just that like we just don't think of. But I mean, there's a lot of ways, like in terms of like the AC, how to make your house more sustainable, use more sustainable products. I think. You know, in terms of like waste, I mean, I'm a huge, I mean, Adam knows this because we fought a landfill, and thank you for supporting us. So, I mean, the landfill, I mean, I think that's a big thing, you know, so much waste. We waste so much stuff, and it goes into the ground, and that really hurts our land, and hurts our future, and that's how I kind of like share with people that you could do things yourself. I mean, you are contributing to climate change as well. Just think of like research. I mean, you're smart. I mean, I think you're Tulane students, so you know, you're smart. So just do your own research on how you can play a part. But these are the things that we teach our young people at Vela. That hey, you know, like we recycle. You know, we make sure that we turn off all the lights. Like that's a very simple things. TV, computers, all that stuff. There's if young people come together and like do I think Reboot, and for those like Jewish folks, I think Reboot have done like a national day of unplugging. So basically the unplug stuff from that one day, everybody unplugged, and that saves lots of stuff, right? And then even like, you know, stop using your car to drive 1 mile. Why don't you just walk, right? Bags, you know, reusable bags. Don't keep on using the plastic bags. I think those are the things that you could really think about in terms of taking care of the environment, so the environment could take care of us. So I think that's sort of how you really need to look at it.
And mine is completely different from theirs. The comment period for the master plan is still open. If everyone would maybe go and comment and ask that all the coasts would be restored instead of just spots, and rebuild the barrier islands would help save our land for a little while longer.
Buy a hybrid car or electronic car. I don't know.
Get a bicycle.
Where's the microphone?
Get a bike.
You got it, Roger.
Hi, I'm Ann Daniel. I am at Loyola University. I teach there. And I'm wondering what role spirituality plays in rebuilding community, sustaining community, and in sustaining the land. And I imagine that could be church, but also, other forms of spirituality as well that would be different for different communities, I imagine.
We've always been spiritual people because, we recognize that we are part of something greater than ourselves. And in recognizing that you're part of something and seeing your life in that context, knowing that you're not the end all of end all, life, there are other life forms that we are dependent on for our own lives. And I think that in that respect, we learn to respect, the life that's around us, just the microscopic, the insect life, the flora, the fauna, because our lives are truly dependent or intertwined in that manner. So spirituality plays a large part because it's kind of like the heart of the community, the heart of the people. Sometimes you might be at odds with someone over a difference of opinion, But in those quiet moments of spiritual reflection, you know, you can find peace and calmness, or you can find, you know, an answer or a way to maybe reach out and resolve some differences. So it's important. It's very important. And it's not always about the building. You know, those are good. We just finished a church building in my community after 10 years of not having a church building in our village. But we still managed to come together during that time. So, you know, it's important. It's very important.
And you know, right after Katrina, we came together around a biblical scripture. Nehemiah said, "Let us arise and rebuild," but the emphasis was on us. But before we could rebuild, the whole community had to be revived. So we're talking about reviving our community. But we're talking about not only spiritually, but mentally as well, because they're all going hand in hand. And so we have the saying that we walk by faith, not by sight. So that's why when things come our way, you know, because of our spirituality, we know that we're more than conquerors. So that's what keeps us going, and that's been the thing that kept our community together for all these years and continue to have us do what we do.
I'm gonna do a quick shameless plug. So there's a documentary called A Village Called Versailles. You could rent it. You could rent it from the library. And that was a documentary on our community in New Orleans East, and how the church played a huge role in terms of resisting the environmental racism that we experienced after Hurricane Katrina. And a priest, Father Nguyen, was instrumental in that as well, and being a driver to bring people back home to New Orleans, and from there, like, really instilling hope. I think that's what, you know, Reverend Tyrone was talking about. Just, you need to have hope in order for you to even progress or thrive or believe that you could do something. And I think that's, and you need to have the spirit to do it, right? And I think that's one aspect of it. And I think just going back to like what my parents, what they do, like they celebrate everything. Oh, the Saints won, yeah, like this, you know, and drink and you'll get messed up or whatever, right? So they do that. They build community in that way, so they can feel like, hey, we are like together, right? Yes, despite all the stuff that we've been through, we still have each other. We still have a community. We can support each other in any way possible. And I think having that type of spirituality is really important. It's actually very necessary. I want to go back to one other thing that I talk about a lot during the oil spill. And I had to sit down with my dad with this because we met with SAMHSA, which they deal with a lot of mental health issues. And I asked my dad, like, "Hey, Dad, like, what do you do? What do Fisher folks do for mental health, for therapy?" And what he shot back at me was like, made me cry. It was like, they took that away from us. We go fishing. That's therapy for us. And I'm like, oh man, like that's really deep, right? And that's something that I think, you know, we have to continue to save our coast, because that's also a lot of people therapy. That's how they continue to have spirit, right? And just imagine, why do so many men like to go fishing? Because they want to get away from everything. That's their therapy, right? And I don't think people really realize that, but they don't want to go fish just to go fish. They're getting away from like everything else, right? That, like, when they catch something, it boosts their spirit. When they hear the line drag, that's amazing for us. Right? So, anybody fish around here? I don't know, like, I'm speaking by myself. Okay, cool. All right, cool. So so that's sort of like what we need to do. And I think that's something that, again, all of these things are really important. We just have to look at it in a different way. And that's how, yes, spirituality is really important in multiple facets.
Yes, and I believe our community is also a spiritual community. We have prayer before all tribal meetings, and my mother-in-law, when she plants her garden, as she's putting her seeds, she told us she's asking God to give her a good crop. And most of our people that do plant, I've heard many of them say that as they plant, that's where they feel the closest to God.
Do we have time for a couple more?
Yes, 2 more.
We'll follow up another intense question. But my name is William Morrow. I'm the curator of Newcomb Art Museum just next door. Can you hear me?
You gotta speak up a little bit.
Okay, this is on. Can you hear me? Okay.
It is on, you just have to eat
Speak
it.
into it. This may be a difficult question, but a couple of you have mentioned environmental racism or racism as part of the history of this region, from your family coming from Vietnam, or from the plantation history and the master plan, which you so eloquently referred to. I wonder if you could speak about how you're educating around environmental racism and how that plays a factor in your efforts, or if it does, then that might be very personal, so I apologize in advance.
Well, you know, we understand that America is built on racism, so that's not hard for us to really deal, because even if you take the word America and unscramble the words, you can get I am race, you know. So we understand that's a given. Right after Hurricane Katrina, Dan Rather came to interview us, and the only thing he wanted to talk about the segregationist parade. And he kept trying to get me on the rail. I said, look, man, I don't even want to talk about racism. I want to talk about how we rebuild our community in spite of the racism, because we already know that's a given for us. So we talk about how we come together because we have to deal with it. I mean, it's like the air for us, you know, so we understand that, but we talk about how it don't have anything to do with us as a community doing for self. And so we just see the given, and so we try to teach it to our young people so they can understand it, but don't let it stop them from doing for self. So, you know, that's how we're able to do what we're able to do, because it's a given for us.
Well, we noticed that some communities made up of different people in aftermath of disasters, where the resources go. But what we do, we tell our especially our young people, when, you know, they notice the disproportion of, you know, what's being rebuilt, what's being replaced, you know, what they're having to make do, is that you're descended from the first peoples on this continent. So that gives them a sense of identity and belonging, and knowing that, you know, you are still here in spite of all of the difficulties. And, you know, by the grace of the Creator who created us all, you know, you will still be here, you know, if you continue to maintain that integrity, you know, because that's not for sale at any cost.
So I can talk about environmental racism all day. So I mean, I think just tracing back, I mean, Louisiana itself, right? We have something called Cancer Alley. And a lot of the neighborhoods around Cancer Alley are actually predominantly like black folks, right? And then I could talk about the landfill. I mean, they could have put the landfill anywhere after Hurricane Katrina, but they chose to put it in a predominantly Vietnamese and African American community. So, and it's not even the best place to put it, because we're right by, the landfill is right next to the largest wildlife refuge in the United States, Bayou Sauvage. Why you put that there, right? So that's another thing. We have something, we have a neighborhood called Oakville, right? There's, again, huge recycling plant right next to this neighborhood, right? Where I mean, it's predominantly black, right? If you look at just the history of the United States, a lot of these dump sites, I mean, so I don't know if y'all know this, but like they're constructing a lot of high schools and schools in New Orleans right now. Do you know that they're building on top of wasteland and dump sites? Like, don't even get me started. I mean, I can talk about it all day, how they're treating our families and our community. They're not doing that in a predominantly white community, just to be really frank. And not only that, they're moving, like in Atlanta, they're moving like cemetery, like they're putting dumps in cemeteries that is predominantly black. right? So I think these are the things that we're talking about in terms of like environmental racism. If you go into New Orleans East, I mean, look, it took 9 years to get a hospital, right? You look at our streets, still all messed up. We have blighted like housing everywhere, blighted houses everywhere. These are the things that they're not being addressed. But you go like here uptown, it looks like nothing ever happened, right? Wow, it's 10 years ago, 10 years from Katrina, and we still look like a hurricane hit us yesterday. So that's what I meant by around like environmental racism. There's so many that you can just look at. I mean, we have Six Flags. Six Flags still like closed for the storm. The sign is still up, right? So these are the things that obviously, like, yes, you know, we have to point out, we have to address that this is really happening, and we can't come together. We need to come together as a human race and not look at it that way, because race is not really real. It was constructed by people who have money and have power, who wants to stay in control. Like, a lot of these stuff were made up just to like let you think how we are, right? And we just did a whole series around race and racism and where it came from. And of those who are not educated about it, I encourage you to go look into how race came about, because that's, again, like, you know, United States, like this country, we made that happen.
Well, in our community, we believe that the reason we don't get any help after a hurricane is because it's a small Native American community. After a storm, my husband and his brothers and some of the other members of the community are the ones that clean the roads, chop the trees that fell, and we don't see the parish until a good while after a hurricane. And we don't get any service, hardly any services from the parish, even though we call. And so we believe that it's because it's a Native American community. So there's racism, and there's always been racism. And I grew up in that time, and thank God it's not as bad as it was before, but it still needs a lot of improvement.
And one last, and then maybe y'all can go to the reception and follow up.
Hi, my name is Giselle. Some of you have talked around this, but you talk about changing the balance of power, and I just wonder, I mean, given that, it's my understanding, and I may be wrong, that there are parallel communities of ordinary working people living alongside of you who are very, very resistant to some of this because they have jobs in the oil industry that are not willing to give them up. Because saltwater incursion, and I assume when you talk about rebuilding the wetlands, you mean that the course of the river may have to be changed. That's part of the master plan, is that correct? Or?
No, the part I'm talking about, not, the LSU is talking about changing the course of the river. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about how you prevent wind surge from coming in, because this hurricane, category 3, category 5.
So let me just get back to,
okay.
I'm sorry, so I may be wrong about this, but my understanding is that saltwater incursion has greatly benefited a certain segment of the fishing and shrimping community, and they are unwilling to give up any of that. And I just wonder how you see the economic interests of communities of ordinary people who are right alongside of you. Is that not correct? That they are not willing to give up, that they are resistant to those changes?
I'm from a fishing community a long time, and with the when the salt water comes in, it kills off the vegetation. The vegetation, it's what the young animals need as places, hatcheries or whatever. So as the land washes away, the salt water kills off the vegetation because the root system is no longer there. So saltwater intrusion has not, you know, helped the fishing industry, because when the waters are deeper, you know, faster moving, whatever. So you find less and less of your traditional family fishermen able to take their small fishing boat and, you know, fish in their home waters, more or less. So they're having to try to find bigger boats to go further out, because what we used to catch in the bays and in the bayous, because of the changing of the environment now, that catches further out. And because the hatcheries are no longer there, you know, they're not able to be sustained in that particular area again. So saltwater coming in has hurt everything.
So how do you see changing the balance of power? Because there are people right alongside of you who are resistant to some.
I think what she's trying to get at is that everybody has their own personal interest at stake.
Well, let me just say, we was talking about getting the oil company to be responsible for the wetland, because all the pipe digging it that went on had something to do with coastal erosion. Of course, there was a few people who worked for the oil industry came out, but we didn't see them as our community being divisive. We don't see them like next door, we're part of the same thing. So we get this, man, I understand that you're interested, but we got to look at the whole community. And so we get together and talk about that. So we don't get anything where we really separate apart. I mean, quite naturally, if you made your living offshore and you did it and your family did it, you're going to have an interest in it. So we begin to say, well, no, man, but they still have a responsibility. So I don't see us being that far divided as people try to make it to be. At least I can talk about where I live at, because I have relatives that work offshore, and I say, man, now, you know, this stuff is hurting us. And they begin, oh, I don't see what you're saying. So I don't see it as just fights that you're putting it. I think we need to understand that coastal restoration is all our fight. And we're just saying that we're not going to, Rosina and I are not going to get in a fight because her family work offshore and mine doesn't. We say, no, we still got to get them being responsible. So we have to not separate that. And we had some people, when we was talking about fresh water versus salt water versus brackish water. So we get together to talk about what it is, because fresh water helps. It kills oysters, man. That's why none of the oysters can't get no oyster now, because they need salt water. But fresh water is for other fish. So we're not going to get involved with fresh water versus salt water confrontation, because that's what people want to do. We said, no, we got to look at when we need fresh water, when we need salt water. So when you talk about these diversions, sometimes you got to put them in at a certain time of the year where you let certain amount of fresh water in, you let certain amount of salt. So we talk about how we regulate this, all the stuff, because it takes all of it. But when you go to saying one over the other, where the dichotomy either or. No, we say it's not either or. How do we make it all work together? And so that's what we're talking about, bringing our community together. Say, no, man, we need salt water somewhere, we need fresh water, but we got to talk about how we control it.
I agree. I don't believe it's an all or nothing situation. And I believe there's a strategy in play here where divide and conquer. You know, kind of scenarios that are being played up by the powers that benefit, you know, from that type of mental picture that they're trying to plant and instill. And the more people buy into that, because a lot of people that work offshore, you know, they enjoy the benefits of being on their off days and catching shrimp or going fishing or hunting, whatever. So they enjoy those resources. And so they are interested in conservation. You know, they are interested in preservation. You know, they are interested in trying to make a difference. You know, we have a huge dependency on oil and gas. You know, are we going to wean ourselves from that in my lifetime? I don't know. But, you know, there are alternatives, as he mentioned earlier, that we need to explore. So it's not as dire as it's made out to be, and there's not that much conflict as what's being played up and trying to be sold to the general public, because we all have a vested interest. You know, we are all part of the user groups of this environment, so everyone wants to see it protected and preserved, because we all benefit from it ultimately.
So, yeah, I think, this is a really interesting question, because, a few years ago, I went to the Blue-Green Alliance conference, and that's when all the oil company workers and the environmentalists came together and to talk. It was really kind of weird being in the space with them, right? But I think at the end of the day, we were talking about we want to survive, we want to make a living, we want to have healthy family, and I was like, yeah, we want that too, right? And So I think like it's just looking back to that time and looking back at now, like think about who's really struggling right now. The oil company, like people are being laid off left to right at the oil company, right? So, and because of the fracking and all that stuff that is happening, the gas price is going so low, so many people getting laid off in the oil company. So now it's like now we both lose, right? So I think like we need to have more conversations to come together and say, so how can we work together, right? How do we work together to get what we want and work towards that versus just letting capitalist system like really eat both of us? Because at the end of the day, we don't win, and the system is they want us to fight each other. They want us to do that, and we need to be smarter about it, right? Because at the end of the day, somebody's making money, making a lot of it. And it's definitely not our family. It's not the people who are on the ground. They're not making $100,000. You know, they're not doing that. The people who are building the system are the ones benefiting from it. And they rely on us fighting each other. They want that to happen. And that's just me looking at it from like a very pessimistic young person point of view, but that's basically what it is. And when we begin to fight each other and start to pick and choose, it was designed for that, and they win.
Well, thank you all for your questions, and thank you all for this enlightening discussion. I'm sure that folks will have more questions at the reception. Thank you.
Thank you.